Welcome back, friends, to the latest episode of Mind Games with Guerin Emig, a production of the Sellout Crowd Network. I'm the host, Guerin Emig. Thank you very much for tuning in. Always thank you for reading my content on selloutcrowd.com. That goes for me and my colleagues. We work hard to put things together, whether at games or practices or press conferences, or in this case, podcasts with regard to that forum. We know you have choices when it comes to your content. Gosh knows you have your choices. And we thank you for landing at selloutcrowd.com when you do. Keep following us through this football season and beyond as we start to load up on the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Sooners and Cowboys as they dial up a basketball season. It is November for the moment, and we are still there for chest deep in football. Things got interesting in Stillwater this past weekend. I was there to cover it for Sellout Crowd, and my guest on Mind Games this week, Chris Vannini, was covering it for The Athletic. So let's dig into Chris's head and see what he thought of the game, the story that he got out of the game, the rivalry, the series, whatever you want to call it, its future, and then we'll get into college football and have some fun before we let him go. Chris, thank you very much for dropping by, first of all.
Yeah, happy to be here, man. It was good to see you on Saturday.
It was. We'll talk about Saturday a lot. I've been a follower and an admirer of yours for a while. I've read your content for a good number of years. But for those who are wondering about Chris Vannini, can you lay it out for us as to what you do for The Athletic and where you were before that?
Yeah, I have been with The Athletic since 2017 when we launched the college football vertical back in the day. Started off kind of covering Group of Five conferences, but I've now expanded to just general national coverage. I live in Dallas. It's a great place to cover college football from a national perspective because you can get to a lot of places, including up to Norman and up to Stillwater, both of which I made trips for the first time this year. Enjoyed both of them. Before that, I was at coachingsearch.com. I ran that, was part of that for about 5 years. And before that, I was pretty much in college. So,
Coaching Search. That sounds like it might have been an interesting gig. Coaching Search. Was it stressful, exhilarating, both, neither?
It was started by a former coach, covered football coaching transactions when it was that time of year, but also coaching philosophies, and kind of the target audience for the website largely was coaches, but a lot of fans and media members liked it, and Stuart Mandel was a big fan of it. So when he started The Athletic College Football, he kind of wanted me to bring that in. So that's what happened in 2017.
So your first trip to Stillwater was for Bedlam on Saturday. You picked a pretty interesting weekend. Right? I mean,
yeah. So I pull into town and I have no phone service. Like as soon as I'm getting into town, and I didn't have phone service all day other than when I was in the press box for the Wi-Fi. And I have a friend who went to Oklahoma State, went to the game, and he said normally he can sit in the crowd and watch another game on his phone. He had never seen it that just intense, crowded, that basically shut down the phone service. Or at least I had Verizon, so at least Verizon was not working very well there.
Yeah, and then you got the game, which was its typical wild self when it comes to this series, right? I mean, that part was not unusual at all for those of us who've invested in covering it for a number of years. The winner was a little unusual. Obviously, the Sooners have had that sort of go in their favor for a century running. But even I was moved and blown away, for lack of a better cliche, Chris, by the reaction. And I know it was a close game, and close games that are decided right at the end tend to breed that kind of reaction. But I was not prepared, and I don't think Oklahoma State and Mike Gundy or the players were prepared for what occurred on the field after the game, what I assume occurred all weekend on campus and in the community of Stillwater. It really was breathtaking.
Yeah, well, they should have been prepared because I talked to some fans before the game who said, if we win, we're tearing down the goalpost and we're taking them to Theta Pond. So at least some people had plans for what was going to happen if the game turned out the way they wanted. I didn't know what to expect going in. I mean, like you said, Oklahoma has dominated this series. The program seemed to be back. However, they were kind of back on a downturn after the Kansas loss, and Oklahoma State was on the way up. And, sometimes these things happen. Very rarely, obviously, the first time in 90 years that Oklahoma State won consecutive games in Stillwater. So quite a way to go out.
Yeah. And you did something really smart and it was a real highlight of your terrific piece on the game at The Athletic. And you followed the goalpost right to the pond.
Mostly, I didn't follow them from when they got taken down because I was down there with you on the field, and it was just a
Right.
madhouse to even get into the tunnel.
A little
Because
later, maybe then? Yeah.
yeah, I left the press conference early and went back because
Okay.
I
There
knew
it
where the
was.
goalposts were. Because the students are coming down, all of us in the media, we got to get out through that tunnel where the student section is
Right,
to
right.
get to the press conference. And so it was only going to get more and more crowded. So we all tried to get in there before it got too crowded. We eventually did. You and I and other people were waiting down there for a while until everybody kind of came off. But as time was going on and someone came through the tunnel and said they tore down the goalpost, and I was like, okay, I think I know where it's going. I'm going to have to keep an eye on that. And so after Gundy spoke to us, some players and people came in. I was like, I'm going to go look for them. I'm going to take that 15-minute walk over to Theta Pond and see if they're there. And there they were.
Yeah, they
It was,
were.
I guess, one of them.
Yeah. What was it? Someone in a Barry Sanders jersey was had waded in. Is that right? That was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was already in the water when I got there,
Right.
sticking out. Awesome photo to just have it sticking there. And some people were like, they need to just leave it there. It's the last Bedlam. Just leave the goalpost there. But eventually, it did get pulled out. Dave Wilson at ESPN went there later in the night to go by it, and he apparently happened to get by it right as some people had swam in to pull it out, and they took it with them. So, not sure where it is right now, but people made some memories.
Man, I didn't know that they'd yanked it out of there that night.
He posted a video like 5 a.m.
I didn't see
I
that.
think it was. Yeah. So it did come out.
And Chris, I was back in Stillwater Monday, and because I'm, my age, I'm absent-minded. I didn't think to go by the pond because I thought, well, I bet it's still there, and I bet they're thinking what you just said. Monument. Make it a monument.
Yeah, right.
As weird as it is to see a pond a beautiful scenic pond, right in the at the heart of campus or at the entry to campus, it had this big yellow piece of steel sticking out of it. That's weird unless you know what it means, right?
Yeah, yeah. And obviously, I know that the history of tearing down the goalpost against Oklahoma, I think, goes back to like '97. I think it was when they tore it down and tried to hit the Oklahoma band with it, and that's why the Oklahoma band is up at the top. Somebody told me. We were debating before the game. We're like, if they take down the goalpost, how are they going to get it out? Because it's pretty enclosed there. And so I eventually saw the videos where they went to the closed end zone and kind of lifted it up over the wall, took it out the loading dock entrance. So good ingenuity and planning to figure out how to get that out.
Right. And then Gundy, of course, who's usually on top of his game anyway, at his weekly press conference, has the comment that it's too bad someone didn't think to tear the thing into pieces and sell them to help fund NIL at OSU. Maybe someone's thought of that since, or the process has already begun. But no, man, it was crazy. And again, you don't, as a national writer for The Athletic, you just said you're not in Stillwater every week. Obviously, you don't see Mike Gundy every week. But take it from someone who sees him quite a bit more frequently, I got a kick out of just seeing him stick around and just, chill out, right? For almost an hour, he was in that room. First at the podium, he does a 10-minute opening statement, which never happens. And then after he's done with the group and the players start to trickle in with the two coordinators, he sits down unprompted.
Yeah.
And sort of crosses his legs or puts one of his legs up on the stage there, right? And has another 30 minutes with whoever wants to listen to him talk. You talk about giving away how you really feel, right? I guess is what I'm saying.
That's what we all wanted in the media coming out of the game. We were hoping like excited, energetic Gundy. Hey, you won the last Bedlam. Talk about how much it means. And he didn't really want to do that. He was very just calm in what he was on the podium. But as that half hour plus went on, he started to kind of relax more and open up a bit more. So we ended up getting better quotes out of him later on. But I was wondering, was he going to come in fiery and stuff like that, like we saw in the locker room later? But he tried to stay head coach on. But you could tell as it went on that how much that game meant to him, as you would expect.
And here's where we try. I anyway have tried to wrestle with how to feel about the future of the series. My inclination just in that moment and, out on the field, trying to work my way into the tunnel that we're referencing here through the students and fans flooding the field, and to hear, we are never, ever getting back together on the loudspeakers, and knowing the post is going to come down and knowing that it's never going to get that good again. It just isn't. I don't think at Boone Pickens State. Maybe it is, but since they're not going to play Oklahoma anytime soon, I'm not sure it's going to get any better ever at Boone Pickens Stadium. So I'm thinking, well, this is the reason you can't lose this series, right? Just as a neutral, you can't, because that game and that rivalry, that series produced this moment. But then I thought a little harder over the weekend about, well, I'm seeing it from my perspective and not from Gundy's or Chad Weiberg's or Casey Shrum's, the university presidents, or any of the fans in that stadium or any of the fans across the state or wherever else. Given the hardship of 100 years and given how good Saturday felt, I think the way you put it was they let loose a century of pain. That was your term for it in your story. I guess to think of it from that standpoint, that moment on Saturday, that's a reason not to play any longer. If you're looking at it from an orange tinted pair of glasses.
If you're going to win one, win the last one, because I kept thinking coming in, I was like, is this going to be like Texas A&M? When it ends in College Station and Texas hits a walk-off field goal and Texas A&M has to live with that for a long time until it turns out Texas is coming into the SEC. And look, their explanations are, look, we play 9 conference games. The SEC will probably go to 9 conference games at some point. It's hard to find room. You don't want to schedule too hard because you still want to make the playoff. Yeah. And we've seen this with a lot of rivalries. I mean, West Virginia and Pitt went like a decade plus without playing after the Big East fell apart, only recently picking it back up now. Penn State, Pitt, a lot of those. Nebraska, Colorado finally came back. And so it's like, there's not a lot of room when it comes to football. It's a lot easier in basketball and all these other types of sports. So like, I understand it, but I don't like it. Mm-hmm. I hate it. I don't think any fans like it. I talked to a bunch of fans before the game and they were like, no, man, this sucks. Like, we don't want to stop playing this game. We want to make the easy drive up to Stillwater and see. I mean, this is the thing with in-state rivalry games. Like this year, I've gone to Texas, Oklahoma, Washington, Oregon, Michigan State, Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. And that Michigan State, Oklahoma State game, when it's an in-state game and you walk around the tailgates, there's so many combined fan tailgates because everybody has friends who went to Oklahoma State and you went to Oklahoma. And so like, it's different when it's an in-state rivalry. That's what makes college football special. And it really sucks to be losing that. And I saw a fan who had a sweatshirt on before the game. It said, Bedlam, 1904 to 2023. Well, bye. Like that. That's kind of the feeling. No, everybody's just kind of sad that it's ended.
Yeah, and I'd hate to think we've become hardened. I hate to think we have become hardened by sort of the wheels and the mechanisms in motion that's changed the sport, right? And we all know what drives everything now. And I mean, we're not going to get into that necessarily, but we still have to feel something about it. And when before OSU went to Tempe to play Arizona State back in September, I'm asking Gundy, that league's going away. I mean, it's going to
be a conference game too. Like,
well, now
you're going to be going to Tempe more too. That's not the same.
And Chris, this was before the Pac-12 caught fire, right, and became sort of the hottest thing in the country. We had no idea that Washington was going to be this good, and Oregon was going to be this good, and Utah was still going to be a problem, and Oregon State, right? So even back in September, I'm like, that's a Power 5 conference that's dissolving. And now we've got Bedlam dissolving. And I just hate to think that we're so numb, because it's pretty easy to get numb about a lot of things, not to, broaden this too much. But I'd hate to think that we're so numb to just the reality of where college football is headed, if not college athletics. And like, well, this is the way it is. We'll just have to adapt and move on. I'd like to think we're still making time to be a little bit either sad or dismayed or frustrated is what I guess I'm getting at.
That's why, like, when I went into that game Saturday, I knew what I was going to write about, no matter the result. Mm-hmm. Like, it could have been a blowout game one way or the other. I was going to lead the story pretty similarly because I spent a lot of time researching the history of Bedlam. Like, when's your next opportunity to write about the last Bedlam? That was the story of the game. No matter, Big 12 implications didn't matter. Oklahoma's playoff implications didn't matter. Everybody I talked to, it was all about, this is the last rivalry game. That transcends everything else going on in the sport. Rivalries, in-state rivalries. And so, I try not to become numb to that. I try to mourn when we lose conferences or lose those rivalries, because we need to remember what makes the sport different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, bingo. It was a reminder, kind of a I guess, an unexpectedly harsh one for OU fans. Who, by the way, you'll be, even if you're not covering Oklahoma, the attitude of a Blue Bloods fan base, right? I mean, one loss is enough for people to, do I want to wake up and go to work Monday morning? That kind of thing. And so the questions continue to surround not just Brent Venables after back-to-back defeats, but Jeff Levy. My argument, Chris, is that the Sooners were kind of who they were when they were 7-0. They were just doing the things in the margin, so-called, to win some, tight. Texas being the most obvious example, but even UCF, that was a warning shot, right? Coming off the open date after Texas. They just got caught in those margins the last 2 weeks. And I think it's okay to still credit Brent Venables for making things better, which he clearly has, compared to last year when they went 6-7, while also accepting the fact that people got a little bit too excited, perhaps, about this team's ceiling. I don't know, again, if you cover Oklahoma closely enough to feel comfortable with a specific or detailed comment, but that I'll throw that out as sort of my perception of the Sooners at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually covered them 3 times this year. I've covered their games more than anybody else.
Yeah.
I guess I'm as guilty as that as anybody, because I wrote Oklahoma is back after the Texas game. But so I went to the SMU game, and I came away from that game thinking, I don't know about this team.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was very concerned about what they were doing in the trenches and running the ball and stopping the run and protecting their quarterback. And I came out of that game thinking, they're not beating Texas unless something dramatically changes in the trenches. Mm-hmm. And it did, actually, in the Texas game. But that has proven to be more of an aberration than the norm. They've been very up and down. Kansas was able to move the ball. Oklahoma State was again able to run the ball. And so it's ultimately the team I think I saw early in the season.
Mm-hmm.
I think you win a big game against Texas, it's the best win in the country at that point. You get your flowers for that. That's understandable. But we knew this was a team that was not going to win the national championship, even if they got into the playoff. So now it's just happened. Now you kind of have to deal with that earlier than maybe you would have liked.
Yeah. As for Oklahoma State, I caught your latest podcast with Nicole Auerbach, Power Hour, right, on the Athletic Network.
Yeah, it's on the Until Saturday podcast is the name of the podcast. Power Hour is, we do it once a week on that feed. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. The happy hour portion of the show, and folks will appreciate the sort of the motif there that you guys have put together. I like that, the drink motif. The happy hour portion involved OSU winning Bedlam, but also potentially being on track to go play for a Big 12 championship. I didn't get the sense you were completely sold on that. That they still have, I mean, obviously they still have work to do. They got to win 3 more games to sort of to literally control their destiny. But you think that there's something that something can catch them, whether UCF, BYU, if I've got this right.
Yeah,
or
UCF,
Houston.
BYU, and Houston. They finished with 3 of the newcomers.
Yeah,
and the
right.
4 newcomers. The 4 newcomers have done very, very poorly in the conference this year. So like, there's reason to be optimistic. Oklahoma State controls its own destiny. I just think kind of the history with Oklahoma State, sometimes after they follow a big win over a ranked team, they lose to an unranked team. It happens sometimes. And this is a team that continues to get better as the year goes on after that 2-2 start. They're running the ball. They figured things out. It's arguably one of Mike Gundy's best coaching jobs he's ever done. But 2 of those games are on the road. And Gundy himself said after Bedlam, like, this is a good team. It's not a great team. They're not just going to walk into UCF and come out with a win. UCF nearly beat Oklahoma a couple weeks ago. So they're in a good spot for sure. I wouldn't pencil them in yet because 3 games is a lot. 2 of them on the road. A team that we know can lose to South Alabama. Don't take anything for granted.
Yeah. Good but great, I think, goes for both Bedlam teams, I think, this year. And if UCF may have showed that to us most plainly, or for the first time anyway, with regard to the Sooners. Last thing about the Cowboys, Ollie Gordon, did he get involved in the Heisman Derby too late to even get to New York? Does he have a shot to at least go as a finalist? Where are you on Ollie?
I have him number 2 on my ballot.
Yes,
right now.
then is the answer.
Last 2 weeks behind Michael Penix. So
okay.
I think he should be. He's leading he despite barely playing the first handful of games, he leads the nation in rushing. his numbers are really good. And if he has a good close to the season, if they win the Big 12, he'll be in that conversation. A lot of times it comes down. November is going to be like, this month is going to change everything about the Heisman race. You've got so many. It's wide open right now, but you've got so many big games coming. JJ McCarthy has to play Penn State and Ohio State. Bo Nix has to play USC, Oregon State. Michael Penix has to play Utah, Oregon State, and Washington State, I think. So, there's a lot of big, plus conference championship games, obviously. So there's a lot of big games. This is, to me, I think the race is completely wide open. But if Oklahoma State wins out, goes to the Big 12 championship, and Ollie Gordon has a really good performance there, I think he absolutely can and will be in the mix.
That's cool. Just out of curiosity, where do you have on your board Marvin Harrison right now?
I think I had him at number 3 last week.
Okay.
Normally, I'm very heavy on quarterbacks, but nobody's really standing out a ton. Like Jaden Daniels I had last week in the top 3. He had a great game against Alabama as well, even though they lost. He's kind of difficult to place when they're 6-3, which is not his fault. But I had Marvin Harrison number 3 last week or this week.
Interesting. While on the subject of Heisman's, I want to go ahead and. You know this, I'm sure. There is still a Lincoln Riley obsession in this state, and we try not to feed into it too much.
Did they ever name that strip of desolate highway on the Panhandle after him? I know it was presented in the state legislature last year or 2 years ago. I looked it up. I could not find if it ever ended up.
I don't think it did. I don't. Although
I was considering a story. I was like, if they did, I kind of want to go up there and write about it. It'd be a fun story. But I don't think they did it.
There are worse pieces of either land or property that have been unofficially named after Lincoln Riley. I'd safe to say it, and Alex Grinch, and unfortunately Caleb Williams as well, based on what happened 2 years ago. I'm going to go ahead and address this, and then we'll move on. I promise. But did it take Caleb Williams crying into his mother's arms for Lincoln to pull the trigger on Alex Grinch? Or, I mean, did it take a picture of how bad the damage has wrought in that case?
I think it took allowing 199 rushing yards before contact. That might have been the final straw, which is an unreal number that happened last week by Washington's running back alone, Dylan Johnson. Almost 200 yards before contact. Just ridiculous. Lincoln Riley made the change he should have made a year ago, 2 years ago, and as a result, he has cost a potential number 1 pick, again, a chance at a national championship.
Do you feel bad? I like Caleb Williams a lot when he was here. I wish I'd gotten a chance to talk to him, but that's Riley's fault. That was the policy, and we just had to accept it. Missed out, I think, on one of the most interesting personalities, not just players, to come through Riley's program. People have been open to that personality since. It showed a different side after the game Saturday. Do you feel bad for him, or is it hard to feel bad for someone who's making his NIL money and has a Heisman on his case already?
No, I feel bad for him. I mean, I think it was notable, especially it came after 1 week after one of the talking heads said Caleb Williams should shut it down and not play the rest of the season, protect himself. And I think everybody kind of found that notion ridiculous. And I think what Caleb Williams did against Washington to play that well, to come up short, to be completely sad about it, was tough to see. You feel bad for him. He's a guy who's still playing through it, carrying this team on his back, really. And this will be 2 years in a row they most likely don't win the Pac-12, won't make the playoff. And for a guy who's accomplished a lot and clearly wants to win at the highest level, that's tough. It's important to remember these are college kids that are 19, 20, 21 years old, and I did feel bad for him.
Yeah. If there's still, Chris, a scenario where Oklahoma plays USC in the Alamo Bowl, there's no way they're going to play Caleb Williams in the Alamo Bowl, are they? I mean, he's not going to play.
I don't think so, but I was, I covered the Cotton Bowl last year when they played Tulane, and there was talk that Caleb Williams might not play that game.
Okay.
Either. He ended up playing, and he ended up playing playing very, very well. They ended up losing. But I would be surprised if Caleb Williams played a bowl game this year.
I got you. If this were 2 weeks ago, I would have spent the majority of time talking about the playoff situation, because the Sooners were still very much obviously a player back then, or would have been a player. Fact is, now with 2 losses, same as Oklahoma State, they're in the teens in the rankings. If this is a 12-team year, I think we're still having a lot of discussion about Oklahoma State for that matter in the playoff. But as it stands now, we in Oklahoma, I think, are sort of just passive spectators at the reveal and, the discussion. Again, I caught you what you and Nicole went over earlier today. The fascinating thing to both of you seem to be, again, the one loss log jam. Is that where things are really intriguing for you?
Yeah, and by the way, 12-team playoff next year. That's why it's going to be a lot more fun,
right?
Because instead of 10 teams, 9 teams being in the mix right now, it'd be 20. That's right. Going to be fun,
no doubt.
But yeah, you've got Oregon as the top one-loss team at number 6, followed by Texas, followed by Alabama, followed by Ole Miss and Penn State. And Greg McElroy from ESPN made some really good points on the show of like, look, Alabama's beaten some really good teams, or at least some very, very solid teams, while Oregon has beaten Utah, and that's it. Their next best win is Colorado, Washington State. So you could make the case that Oregon should be behind Alabama and maybe Texas, both of them as well, because Texas beat Alabama. But I think that, and the fact that there are so many big games, like these rankings, the next final 4 weeks of this regular season are going to be ridiculous. You've got Georgia playing Ole Miss, Tennessee, Georgia Tech. Oregon's got USC and Oregon State. Washington's got, again, Utah, Oregon State and Washington State. Michigan's got Penn State, Ohio State. There's just a lot of big games, and these rankings are going to completely blow up here pretty soon, which is going to be fun.
Yeah. I know this much. I've followed the reveals this much. There has been a dodge or a sidestep. Dodge may be too strong a word, unfair, but obviously a sidestep when the questions come to Boo Corrigan, the chairman of the committee, and as well as Bill Hancock with the CFP about Michigan and what they're dealing with. You didn't expect them to address that, I take it, or do they need to be a little bit more transparent about how they view Michigan, given what's going on with the sign stealing and Harbaugh and all that stuff?
I mean, they've said the same thing 2 weeks, which is it's an NCAA issue, not a CFP issue. And you can make the case like it's the same idea with James Madison, which is 9-0, but not eligible for fully eligible for a bowl game this year as a transitioning FCS team. So they're not in the CFP top 25 because the NCAA, they're saying, hey, it's the NCAA's call. They're not eligible. We're not going to include them. If the NCAA says Michigan is not eligible, then we won't include them. But until then, we're going to include them. I have more of an issue with Michigan being at number 3 based on who they played compared to actually them being in it. I don't think I don't see any way Michigan is not allowed into the playoff if they win out. I don't see the NCAA Big Ten CFP stepping in and saying no. Harbaugh might get suspended, but I don't think anything's going to stop the team from playing.
Would you think they delineate between a suspension, a regular season suspension, or a playoff suspension if the Wolverines were to get in Harbaugh's case, or is it more likely that's going to be a first 4 games of next season type thing?
Well, it's different. NCAA decisions are going to take a while. It's not going to happen for a while. They'll make a determination. Then Michigan will have 90 days to respond. So the NCAA side of it not getting resolved for a while. All that's up for discussion is the Big Ten. And if Tony Petitti does something, by the time people are listening to this, it may have happened by now because it may happen late Wednesday or early Thursday to be determined. So it could be 2 games, which the commissioner has the ability to do on his own, which would allow him to play coach against Ohio State. If it's more than that, you got to get like a committee in the conference involved. So either way, I don't see them stopping Michigan from playing, being ineligible in anything. The NCAA in general is trying not to punish players and do postseason bans anymore. I know Oklahoma State basketball fans are going to chime in and say, "Look what happened to Oklahoma State basketball." That is the last situation like that we're going to see. Tennessee didn't get a bowl ban. Kansas didn't get a tournament ban. They're not doing that anymore. Yeah.
I still, you talk about feeling sorry for somebody. To connect that sentiment to Caleb Williams, I'm forever going to connect that to that Oklahoma State team that got robbed of a postseason. Mike Boynton, for that matter, as a head coach. But that's another show, Chris. I haven't followed the Wolverine saga, the Harbaugh saga, the Connor Stalions saga as closely as you and other national writers have. Is there any fatigue with that, or are you perpetually fascinated by this?
I'm fascinated by it. Okay. It is one of the funniest scandals we've ever had. we just hit the stage where we found out he was sued by his HOA because of a vacuum cleaner refurbishing business out of a sketchy home in an LLC. Like what is this? And there's nobody's hurt here, it's not compared to a lot of the scandals that have been going on in the Big Ten for the last number of
Yeah.
years, this is very low level stakes,
No doubt.
which is what makes it so funny and so enjoyable. We still don't know for sure who that mystery man was on the sideline for Central Michigan, Michigan State.
That's right.
The NCAA is now involved in that. The fact that Central Michigan has not said, hey, no, that's Johnny, he works for us. I think you can infer who that probably was.
Yeah.
So yes, this is incredibly funny.
I still can't hear the guy's name without laughing, and that just
That
shows
too.
I'm a 5-year-old in that way, but I can't help it. I will always crack up over the fact that that's not a made up name. He should have said it was, and then you earn points for coming up with such a brilliant. I wish I'd used that as my pen name once upon a time. So that kind of thing. All right, exit questions with Chris Vannini of The Athletic on the show. You're good with me letting everyone know that you're a Michigan State grad, so I was going to give you a chance to let our listeners / viewers know who Michigan State should hire as the next head football coach.
Yeah, they're starting to move forward on that search now. It's been open for a long time, obviously, but you kind of wait till the later half of the season before you start doing interviews. It appears they're getting to that stage pretty soon. If I could pick one person for Michigan State to hire, I would go with Lance Leipold at Kansas. To me, he is the steady hand that university needs right now.
Mm-hmm.
Very much in the Mark D'Antonio mold. He has won everywhere he's been. We've seen what he's done at Kansas very quickly. I feel like he just fits that. He's from Wisconsin, Midwest guy. Like I think there's a lot of good fit there. The other 1A, 1B option I think would be Mike Elko at Duke, who has turned that program around very quickly, who has recruited at the highest level at Texas A&M, and who would, again, fit, I think, the personality of what Michigan State is trying to be, which is an overachieving program in a conference of Michigan, Ohio State, and the like. The problem is, if Texas A&M opens up, do they want Mike Elko? So that's the hard thing to predict with the carousel is what other jobs open up, what domino effects happen. Is Jim Harbaugh still there? Who knows? So we'll see. But, Michigan State's a program that 2 years ago won 11 games. They're a lot like Oklahoma State, the 1B team in the state to the big flagship school and always kind of fighting from underneath. And so I look at what Leipold has done. I look at what Elko has done. I think both of those guys would be great fits.
I'm a Kansas grad, since you were
Sorry.
transparent. Yeah, well, no, that's all right. Since you were transparent about your alma mater, I can be as well. I can't believe I'm having to say that there would actually be a decision for a KU football coach to not take a Big Ten job. And yet, because of what Leipold has built, the commitment supposedly to get the stadium redone and, all that stuff in Lawrence, and the work he's had to put into getting it where it is now, combined with the fact that things have been a little bizarre at Michigan State, right? With across the board, they've taken some wrong turns. You again would know more about that than I would, but I think we've all been privy to some of them. It's weird that it would even be a decision, but I guess it would be if it came to that for a guy like Leipold.
Well, there's two ways to look at it. One, Kansas, you can win the new Big 12. There's no reason you shouldn't be one of the higher up teams in that conference and contending for the playoff coming out of that, as opposed to the Big 10 where you've got USC, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State you got to contend with every year. So that'd be one reason to stay. One reason to leave would be, hey, who knows what's going to happen to college football? It's good to have a seat in the Big 10, one of the top conferences that could determine whatever the future of the sport is. And I know Kansas obviously just gave Bill Self the new big contract. Yeah. That may open up some more space to to give Lance Leipold another raise. I mean, he's got a $6 million buyout too, so Michigan State will have to pony up a lot of money if they want to hire him. But some people say, look, Big Ten SEC job, like if you got to take it. If one's available, some people say you got to take it because you never know what the sport is going to do.
For sure. You mentioned Fisher. You think he's in serious trouble? Or hard to say right now?
I do. Yeah. I know his buyout's something like $70 million. But whether it's this year, whether it's next year, whether it's $65 million or $70 million, what's the difference? If you don't think he's the guy and you think you know who is the guy, at one point do you just rip off the Band-Aid and figure out how to pay that buyout over decades, so it's doable. It's not like he's going to get $70 million up front. Yeah. Maybe you do one of those, like, was it Bobby Bonilla? The guy who was the baseball player.
Yeah.
But yeah, the contract that he still gets paid for it, like, I don't know, maybe they come up with something like that for Jimbo to pay him in perpetuity.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not good. His record there is worse than Kevin Sumlin's, so they're not happy. But he may get another year.
Yeah. Yeah. Michigan State wouldn't hire Urban Meyer, right? I mean, you want to clear that up. There's no way that's okay.
It's a popular thing among fans and certain insiders and whatever, but it just makes zero sense whatsoever to me when you consider what the school has gone through as it relates to women and stuff like that, to hire somebody who just, you know, had Zach Smith on his staff for a long time. Like, you remember, like, people got to remember why he left Ohio State, you know, that whole thing. And then he goes to the Jaguars and he allegedly kicks a player. Like, it's not 2017 anymore. Like, college football is completely different.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think Urban Meyer would make much sense as much as a lot of fans wanted it.
Yeah. Okay. Either at The Athletic or in your time at coachingsearch.com, strangest search you've either covered or been associated with, or what pops into your head when I ask you for the weirdest one? Is there one that's
there was I won't say the school, but there was a group of 5 school that one time where the AD just looked up who is running the most plays, found it, and said, I want to hire the offense coordinator of that team. And the coach didn't even apply for the job, got contacted by the school for the job, got the job, got fired I don't know if he got fired or left, but didn't win much, was gone in a couple years. Sometimes the searches are as simple as that, believe it or not.
And here we are complaining about the wasted money that are search firms, and then an athletic director goes and does this.
Yeah, that was a weird one.
Cautionary tale. Number of plays, not yards, just plays, or what?
Just wanted someone who ran a really up-tempo offense, because that's what the school was doing.
Oh wow! Now you've got my mind racing. Okay, we'll leave us in suspense. Okay, last thing. The one thing that didn't make it out of the pandemonium for you on the field at OSU is your wristwatch. Any chance that has been recovered from Saturday?
It was not. No, I just had a regular smartwatch, not like an Apple Watch, but just like a cheaper version of that. Somehow it popped off during while you and I were trying to get through the crowd to get to the tunnel. I didn't even notice till I sat down in the press room. I was like, oh, I don't got my watch. Never went back out and looked, did not find it. I did order a new one a couple days ago. It should be here pretty soon.
We don't have we're sellout crowds just getting going, Chris. We don't have the reach.
Look, maybe it's at the bottom of Theta Pond too. I don't know.
I was going to say, if this thing were to, if Mind Games were to explode in a couple of years, I'd have you back on, and you'd actually have an audience where you could describe the watch and maybe get someone with a kind heart. I know where that is, but it's good. You're good with it. It's not. Yeah,
it was not very expensive. I will survive.
Very cool. Chris Vannini was at Stillwater for the Bedlam game, the one the Cowboys beat the Sooners in 27-24. He wrote about it. You really ought to read his piece if you haven't yet at theathletic.com. It is superb. Read everything he writes. He does a terrific job. It has done a terrific job now since 2017. 17? Got that right?
Yes.
With The Athletic. Yes. Good deal. We got that down. So big thanks to Chris for coming on Mind Games this week. As always, we want to thank everybody back behind the curtain for doing a nice job. Jacqueline Musgrove and Michael Lane. Jacqueline's our producer, Michael, our creative director. Please download, like, subscribe, do what you want. Just make sure you listen or tune in, watch YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, my show, and others from my colleagues at selloutcrowd.com. This is Guerin Emig, wishing everyone a pleasant week. Come back next week for another episode of Mind Games.